This is another in the first read series where I read a poem by a poet I don't know or know very little about, and I just read for the sheer joy of it. Um, I don't know that I'm going to be right on. I might change my mind if I knew more about the person, if I learned their themes, how they write, what they think about. This is just that moment of encountering something and having that experience. So this time, I'm looking at a piece in the Missouri Review from 2019. It was written by Maya Phillips. There's a little note about Maya here. I haven't read any of this. I've just picked them randomly. I don't tend to like reading the bios that much before I have the first experience of it. I mean, I'm sure it's, fine and dandy and there's credentials and all that stuff in it. Great. Let's go to the poem first. So Alecto, I kind of picked this one just because of the title. In a lot of poetry, people have strayed away from myth completely recently because, it was overdone, I think, in the 20th century. And now there's a kind of return to females from myth, and especially in fiction, but it's happening a little bit in poetry to kind of re-see the women in their place in mythology, which is kind of an interesting take on things. I'm not sure if that's what's going on here. All I have is a title and a poet here. But Alecto, of course, was one of the Furies. Interestingly, she was Gaia's daughter, and if I remember correctly, she was kind of born somehow out of the castration when Uranus castrated his father. So, pretty strong female character. So it would be a great person too to go back and kind of resurrect, because it's kind of this woman unbound. This woman is chaos. This woman who brings madness as a fury. This is kind of what she did. We have her in Virgil's the Aeneid, being sent to kind of sow this madness, and she takes on somebody else's body to sow madness. And she shows up in Dante in that great scene where the pilgrim in the Inferno is threatened with Medea's head, right? But so she's kind of this not controllable female element, which is an interesting mythical character to bring back up. She's not one of the other celebrated women of myth. She's not Persephone or something that you see all the time, who kind of follows. Or she's not, she's not Penelope or something like that. It's Alecto. She's wild, chaotic, and she's there, right? So it's a long rant about the title, but I kind of preface it with that. I always look at the form before I look at anything. And looking at this one, you can tell it's not, traditional form. I'm assuming it's meant to be double-spaced. I'm a little hesitant with double-spaced poems when they're online, especially because I don't know always if the poet meant to do that or if that's somehow the editor doing that. So I don't like to see them straight up double-spaced. I'd be much more at ease if I saw a couple of single-spaced lines in here, but I don't know. It is spaced out on the page a bit, so I can tell it's an open form. So I'm not going to look for meter. I'm not going to look for rhyme or anything like that off the bat, but I will kind of look for traditional, poetic techniques as I go through it. So I'm just going to read it. Alecto, because a woman scorned. That first line already brings up all these kind of, tropes, these things we know in our head, hell has no fury like a woman scorned. All these kind of things we know from myth, but also these things we still use today. Because a woman scorned, because there's precedence for such a thing. Well, yes, there's definitely precedence for women scorned in ancient Greece, but I think, all over society. Such a thing being the man and the woman to which he was scorned. I like that play on sworn and scorned here. I think, that applies for a lot of classical figures like Jason, Medea. I'm like, God, after reading that story, it's really hard to be on Jason's side in the contemporary world. Now wed to this matter of things, being. So, because this woman's going, now, such a thing being the man and woman, now wed to this matter of things, being the woman who is unceasing in her. She's wed to this new thing, which is being unceasing in her. Let's call it kindness. So I'm assuming this kindness is actually her fury. This woman is scorned and is furious, and that itself is, her kindness, which I think is kind of fun, if that's what's going on. That which is boundless, which is that sense of fury that being scorned causes. I don't know here who the woman is. I mean, is it Alecto? Alecto has been scorned, and this is why she's become Alecto in the first place? Or is she being called upon? Is this like a prayer for Alecto in itself as a figure of bringing madness for women who have been scorned to the other side, bringing some of that primal energy that is tampered down by males in society for so much of history. The one who is unceasing in her, here let's call it kindness, that which is boundless, that which is without cure. There's a lot of repetition here. I think that works pretty well. I think this poet, Maya Phillips, has a great sense of language and sound in language, that which has sisters and mothers and daughters and cousins. I feel like that repetition works really well because there's repetition of women being scorned. Also, because there is precedence for such a thing, which is almost creepily repeated here, which I like that, that repetition of like the vengeance is coming, whatever it is, let's call it birthright. That which is carried, that which is born like a child, that which is called woman, and yes, let's call it woman. This birthright. I don't know what the birthright here is, I think. Is it bringing the fury when you've been scorned, or that you have been scorned? Because that happens so much, where that women are in a scorned position in society, which is called woman. So it's not, it's a created position. It's not a biological. It's a created position. And yes, let's call it woman, because hell hath no, all right, there's in the first line, the thing I brought up, hell hath no, the hell hath no fury, which doesn't have to repeat because you can get it. Hell hath nothing. Hell doesn't have anything in all worlds like this, which is this kind of birthright fury for the position that a woman has been put in by precedence. Which I think is, perhaps Alecto is just symbolic in this of that female figure that shows up. Interesting. I didn't kind of expect, I've heard of Maya Phillips and didn't really expect the kind of a mythological take from her. And so that makes me curious to read some of her other pieces to see how she works with it. I think it's, what I've heard are good, I've heard good things about her work, but I'm kind of curious to see how she does this with other mythological characters, if she does this. So very curious to see how this works out in her work. So I feel like a great first experience for me.